plus the exit interview. And then I did some research on the student member, so I just wanted to share that. And I didn't know if you had anything else.
No, that was it. And somewhere I do have some research on that question on the student members. I will have to see if I can re-find it, because the question was raised, was it 3 years ago? And what Bob raised it before we did a really quick look at it. I just can't remember where it was, but I'll see if I can re-find it too, and I'll certainly take what you have and put it together. I actually think there's some language in our law book. You know,
It is. It's 5.5.
okay.
And it's actually something that we can do, but it needs to be done by a vote. We have to put it in front of the the public for a vote every 2 years, according to the law book. And it's certainly something, and they give you a little bit of background about how you can do it. The way I found it is I Googled it, and it came up with a NISBA letter, and it is in Brunswick Brittenkill has one. So they actually have a policy that identifies that, and they reference that 5.5. And so I looked in the law book, and so it's pretty straightforward. So it would be something, I think, if the board is interested, maybe a committee or referring it to the shared decision-making committee, somebody can take a look at how to move forward if they're interested. So
there's something in there with the 2-year piece. It was something about it's a junior.
well, you can have
if it was like what Brittenkill had done because of that, or if it was regulation.
well, it has to be a senior, non-voting, cannot go into executive session. But what Brittenkill did was, you're right, they had like a student in the wings, as student in training, so that the junior sat in the audience to see what was happening, so that they would be prepared when they were a senior. So that's in the Brittenkill policy, and I don't think it said that it had to be 2, but it had to be a senior in the law book.
Okay, but we'll regather that and look.
The fire alarm may be going off at any time. Please ignore it. Please ignore the fire alarm if it is going off.
Are you having a fire drill?
Well, no, here's what's happening. We have everything, and this is a fire alarm number 3 we've had today. I mean, since this week. They're doing work in the asbestos work, and they're working in some of the ceiling pieces. And what's happened is some of those fire alarms we thought were disconnected and okay, are still connected because they need to be, but they're tripping the fire off. So yesterday morning, they ended up wrenching one because they had to remove it, and that set the alarm off. Today, they were doing demolition, and it's in the ceiling, and it fell to the floor, and that set the fire alarm off. And it's all in the asbestos area, so we can't go do anything about it because it's in the asbestos area. So it's just one of those kind of funny challenges of building projects, and we're letting everyone know that it's okay to walk through the closed doors, look for red tape. That's what your danger is. And announcements like that, it's like, we're expecting to set one off again, just be ready.
So if we hear it, we'll just have to pause, that's all. So just left over from our last meeting, you had brought the concern from the school safety plan, and you were going to look at language for the window coverings. But
I'm gonna share that. I have that language.
Okay.
I'm just gonna share it here on the screen. I was gonna email everything to you last night, and I figured we could just look at it, that I can email it to you afterward.
Okay.
Because it was a lot all at once and late at night and last minute rush, and
we're back to back is kind of,
yeah.
I hadn't really thought it through when we picked the date.
Well, let me get to the right one. I only have 20 things open, so please forgive my end of year email there. Do you see this? It says subject. Oh, sorry, that's the old one. We'll get to that one. We are looking for the fire code one, and that is here. You see that you're seeing on the screen that says window covering language?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
This is when when it was first brought to us, I reached out to Mickey Jones, who is our safety coordinator there, about language. What he is here up top is what she had provided. And it basically, it lays out there about, we have some spaces that are hard to get out of sight to make sure we can keep everyone safe. Without another reasonable option, we can use a temporary, and it's only able to use then for specific occasions, an actual event or a drill. This is about about temporary barricading a door. This is something that I don't think we want to do. We did not talk about it in the committee, but this was similar language if it was about blocking or barricading the door. We're doing some things with door hardware for locking, so barricading will be less of an issue. But this part didn't come up to committee. It's a continuation of there. So we're really looking at this language. The other piece here is these are just kind of Mickey's notes about that language. It says policy and SED, advice that roundabout advice that she's gotten from basically Gervin and Filazzo is that because the board approves the safety committee, the safety plan, that's the board's approval for inclusion.
Are you looking to put this in? Oh, I'm sorry.
If we want to include this in separate policy, we would have to find a place to insert it.
Okay. The reason, classroom door vision panels, is that what your vision panels? In our policy, it says will not be covered except as outlined in the building level emergency response plan. So can this language go in that plan, or does it have to go into the current policy?
You read out, that's our updated policy? No.
Yes.
What's the number on it, please? You have it right there.
5681.
I was close. I'm cheating. I'm in the distance learning room and using two computers. So
Hey, listen.
If we have it in the language already that refers back to the plan,
Yeah.
if the language is there, then it says a simple insertion into the safety plan. And we would be fine. And I'll talk to Mickey on the best place to insert that language to there. I would think it would end up going into the building level part of the plan, not the district level part of the plan. Just because we don't want the bad guys to know that we may be blocking windows so you can't see us, as it would be a signal that there's somebody in that room.
Right. And it does say in the policy, building level emergency response plan.
So we can do that. With that plan, I can get it inserted. We've highlighted all of the new language that we put into that safety plan when we start looking at it next month there. And I'll just highlight that language, put it into the plan so it's located, and we can let the board know that that's where it's at based on what our policy says and the guidance language we got from our safety person. And I think we're in good shape.
Yeah, so we're not recommending any change to the current policy.
I don't think we need to. I think our current policy covers it for us and gives us an avenue.
So you and your planning can go forward from there.
Yep.
Oh, good. One down.
Check.
Check. There's surveillance cameras. And we're going to check to see about inserting some language for district approved, only using district approved cameras.
Yep. And I did that. It is here, and that's exactly what I included. So what's on your screen now is right from the policy book.
Yep.
And really, I only added one line. And it's only district-owned cameras may be used for these purposes. And that first paragraph describes what the purposes of the cameras are.
I think that covers any concerns that I might have had.
Yeah,
I think that clarifies it. If anybody were to look at it, they would know not to use their own.
yes.
So that would come up as a recommendation for a revision to that, or an addition or clarification. How do you identify that?
I think it would go in as a policy change. It would go through the 3-read process.
Okay.
Like we would with anything else. The only thought I just had on this was that not only district-owned cameras be used through these I think we're fine. I was wondering, it wasn't a district use camera that was used in that one incident, and it wasn't really for district purposes either. But I think that would be, the policy outlines what the district purposes are, and to say that these purposes are referring to district purposes, so I think we're okay.
Okay.
Looking at, it would just be kind of redundant if you put in authorized by the district, because that's kind of part of that policy.
Yep. Okay.
Good. And I did see as you were going through the next one, the code of conduct, looked like you had been working on some language for allowing the restorative practices.
Yep. Now, this is an interesting piece of it. This is at the last NISBA conference, when I go to the conferences, I try to hit on the things that the board has for goals or goals for me, or kind of the areas we're headed for, to see what's going on in that area. So at one point in I want to say it was maybe this year's actually convention, I went to the restorative justice one. And in their presentation, this language here in blue is language that is NISBA recommended. I've altered it a little bit to fit into what our policy is. I think in there it was actually in the code of conduct, which is the work that Julie is doing. The way our current structure of the code of conduct is that the policy outlines what the code of conduct is, what its purpose is, how it will be reviewed and changed and altered, and the requirements for approval, right? It comes to the board, public hearing, comment period, and there. And then the document is technically regulation. Some other school districts have that actual document that Julie's working on as the policy document, and I think Bob had alluded to that a bit last night.
NISBA apparently does. I haven't seen their whole policy, but apparently not only does it include all of the requirements, the technical requirements, it has all of the other component parts. It's multi-page long, so it covers everything.
Yeah.
So I did go to that. I don't know if it was the same one, but I know that we need to have language somewhere that, whether it's in that policy or whether it's in the code of conduct, that we actually review every year, to allow that restorative, those practices to be incorporated. As Julie said, it's not to supplant, but it's to be complementary to what they have. So we just wanted to make sure that if there was something that the board needed to do at a policy level, that we were doing that so that they could move forward.
In my thought, this is similar to the safety plan. Code of conduct goes through a very similar process that the safety plan does. Our policy here outlines what the plan is, and all those pieces that we just talked about. And then it's reviewed, the board reviews and approves what the code of conduct is eventually. And as long as that language is included in there and has the board's approval to it, I think we're okay there. Because we have another document underneath this, which is the student handbook, that gets into more of the mechanics and how it works into those pieces. And that's, principals work with teachers and stakeholders on that too. But that's kind of the detail for the parent on, if Kelvin Glover gets in trouble, doing X, Y, or Z offense, this is what could happen. And part of that option would need to be, would be something of a restorative practice in some nature. Just somewhere in that document, we will probably, in that code of conduct document, need about this sentence. And that's accepted in limited circumstances. Restorative justice practice will always be considered first in dealing with disciplinary issues, if that and so is where we want to go. Or do you want language that isn't necessarily that directive? Something that's more of except in limited circumstances, restorative justice practices will always be considered in dealing with disciplinary issues, so it's not a first necessarily. There are, as you remember, there are instances where this approach isn't necessarily the first approach that we would want to take. A student who brings in a gun to school and shoots somebody is not going to be a restorative. We may
No, absolutely not.
include that, but
Know whether, as they look at this code of conduct, whether they're going to like a tiered response to things so that it would be incorporated that way, or is it just going to be language that would allow them to develop?
I sent Julie this. Let me see if I can pull it up here. Did the screen change, or do you see the same screen?
I see just gray right now.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to change what I'm sharing with you. I shared this with, you see the Randolph Union Free School District 1920 Code of Conduct. This is Randolph has kind of been one of the lead school districts in the state in doing conferences and talking to people about what they're doing with restorative justice and kind of done that wholesale change. I've shared this with Julie, and she had said that the person who put this together was in part of their trainings there for language to follow. And this includes, I'm just going to slide here to dress code. And I'll blow it up a little bit so it's easier to see. Let me move you guys out of the way so you're not graying that out. So here in the dress code, it gives you ideas of how the code works. She said this was area, but in the language, it's not necessarily a punitive levels. It's here is where we are with determinations, and then for consequences that would go. Let me do this. Let me find an example of. No, here they talk about this policy clearly defines a set of expectations for acceptable code of conduct on property, identifies possible consequences, endorses the use of restorative practices, ensures that discipline when necessary is administered properly and fairly.
I like that statement. I mean, that gives you.
To the extent the board adopts this code of conduct, which encompasses all provisions of, they're there. So that type of language into the code of conduct, I think, is a policy type statement that the board approves. That's included in the document that works through. And I think if we can include that type of language in the code, we'll be in good shape.
Okay. So are you thinking that it's, from my perspective, I just want to, I will report out that we talked about it, but is that a statement that should go into our policy as it guides the formation of the code of conduct? Or do you think, because I do think that we want to have a statement that says that, the board does endorse the use of the restorative practices where appropriate. So is that something that you think we should incorporate into the actual, like you had, I think, you had taken your language, inserted it into our actual policy?
We can
So
take
that
this
if we
language
do
and put it here.
with similar language and put it there?
Yeah. In this one, or the first two is about the district's developed appropriate written code of conduct for the maintenance of school property, govern the conduct of basically everyone who is there. The board will provide for enforcement of this code. And then that next statement is the statement on restorative practice.
Okay.
And then the next one is for purpose of this policy, this is what, and then it goes into a definitions about what it means to be on school property. And then it goes into how it's developed. And then it goes to how it gets adopted. And then it talks about the review. And then it talks about how we have to make sure that everyone knows about it.
Okay.
So in that end, by including that restorative practice statement as a second paragraph, I think that would clearly state in the policy that it's a priority of the board that this approach be taken. And I think that's what the board wants.
Mary, do you agree that that would be the way to do it?
I do.
So
Definitely. I think it's certainly been a priority.
So Dr. Glover, is that something that you can do a cut and paste and share that with us so that we can see what that would look like?
Yep, I will absolutely do that.
Okay, good.
What I'll do, Ann, is when I'm when I'm done here, I walked in the door and I've been in meeting straight all day today. So as I meet up with Gina to talk about yesterday's board meeting, in pieces, when I get the policy changes done, I'll send them to you guys so you can see them. So see the result of what we talked about. Not necessarily anything on the student member piece, because that's just going to be an information share at the next meeting or at a following meeting. But certainly on the changes to the cameras and the changes to the code of about the change to the code of conduct. The safety language I'm going to work on, and we'll see that when you get that language for July's. We're going to have that July public hearing. That's where you'll get your building level, because you guys hit the building level too.
Okay. And actually, if I were you, I wouldn't do a whole lot of research on the student member yet, because it's really not a determination of the board to move forward with that. We really need to have, even flesh out with everybody whether that is the direction that they want to go. So I'd put that on the bottom of the list for now and let the board decide if that's really, if they want to go through the hoops that you need to go through to have the student member there. So we can put that on as a discussion item. We are gathering some information, and that may be something that we have an ad hoc committee take a look at. So, okay. The exit interviews, just so that we can have a clean copy for our next meeting. I just wanted to make sure that I was noting, what Bob was saying about the actual piece of paper that we had. And
I have that. I'm going to bring it back up. Okay.
there it is.
Either, are you seeing a suggested policy?
I've got it. Mary, do you have it?
Coaching. By the time we don't need this anymore, we'll have this down perfect.
Yes. I'm getting better, but it's still awkward. In the guidelines section, I think what we were talking about is in the second paragraph, changing the word may to shall.
Got it.
And I know that Bob asked some questions about what was in the instrument, and I didn't know, since Mary, you very clearly explained that it was something that was fluid and could change. I was just wondering if in that top sentence, the exit interview survey instrument may include, comma, but is not limited to, comma, questions in the following areas. So that would give
Right, the flexibility.
I'm on the policy here.
the first sentence, the exit interview survey instrument may include, but is not limited to, questions.
Okay. And that's in the first paragraph?
Underneath exit interview survey instrument,
Oh, like right at the top?
in that first next second, I see it on my screen, it's at the top of the screen. It says exit interview survey
Oh.
instrument.
Oh, it's like up here. Like it's in the policy.
No, next one down.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking for the actual instrument you're talking about. Okay, so where is that, the exit interview survey, may include,
comma, but is not limited to. There.
I was making that a lot harder than it needed to be. There we go.
I just think that indicates that there's flexibility in that instrument.
I think there was also a question on this piece here.
Right. I think it just should say the interviewer will provide. Or shall, whichever is the proper. And just take out the superintendent of schools. And so that would be either Karen as district clerk or which one of the principals. Because you've already identified them further up.
Like that.
Yeah. And I did have one other question, and it's just it just seemed a little bit redundant to me.
Okay.
At the bottom, it says at the end, if an employee requests an exit interview, that sentence there, since we're offering it to everybody that leaves, do we need that sentence in there?
Nope, I don't think so. I think that might be a leftover from previous language. So just read the exit interview may be conducted on the employee's last day of employment with the district or at another mutually agreeable time.
And private setting, 60 minutes. And Mary, was there anything else that you picked up from that conversation that?
No, it was mostly, focused on the kinds of questions.
Maybe the third time will be the charm, right? But I think that answers my questions about it. So hopefully
Okay.
that will be good. And then I told Bob that we would just talk about it because I just thought it would be something that it does somewhat relate to our policy about the sexual harassment training. Rather than take time at the meeting last night, how does that training take place? Is that something that people can do online? Is it something that you have to have an in-person training for? How is that carried out?
It can happen both ways. And I mix it up. It's a relatively new requirement for us. So I've had in person do that. That way people could ask questions to their from a BOCES person to their, just so they have an outside person to come and ask questions and can interact that's there. We are looking to have an online option be available too. If we were to ask volunteers to do that training as well, we have an account set up. We'd have them, we'd have to have them log into that. When they complete it, there's a certificate they'd have to publish and submit to us to have on, and to have on and into place. Or, because that's what we ask for teachers whenever they do anything online. When they get done, we ask them to complete the survey. So we offer it both ways.
Is now for paid staff, it's a requirement that they maintain that training.
Yes.
It's not for volunteers, am I speaking correctly? It's not a requirement for volunteers, so it would be optional?
It would be optional unless the board was going to mandate it. Is my understanding.
Okay. So, but we could, you say that it would be available if we offered it and they wanted to take advantage of it?
Yeah, if anyone, volunteers said, you know what, just to be safe, I would like to go through this type of training. If you have anything, we would certainly make those arrangements. Like I said, that's no cost to us. We pay for the service through BOCES already, for those types of safety pieces. Yeah, so it's not an add-on. It's something we already do.
So right now it's optional unless we were to add it as a requirement, okay. And so it would just be a notification? Is that something that would need to be in policy, or is that something that, I don't know if you have a checklist for volunteer, I don't know, how courthouse readers, how would we get that if for some reason somebody wanted to do that, if we had the two people that I think it's Valita and Meredith, aren't they, that coordinate that? Do they talk to all of the could they make it available to them or tell them it's available, or how would they do that?
Well, I think if we were, each building tracks their own volunteers. We get the list, so we know it in my office, but volunteers in the office go, as go through the application process and then interview with the building principal, and they recommend to me, and then they're fine.
So that would be the opportunity there.
Yeah, it could be there in that interview process of the principal. It's like, or even it could set the expectation of, we have this, as part of this, we ask all of our volunteers to go through this training.
Okay.
This is available. It would be a district cost, of course, but like I said, it's already a service. That we are supposed to do that for both your safety and the safety of kids.
Okay. So that actually is a pretty direct way to ask somebody to go ahead and do that. Does that require a policy change? Or is that a procedural?
It could be both. It could be both. Listen, I'm a little from the hip here. I'm going to look up the policy quick. Because on one level, we could simply, administratively, we could say as part of our process, we go through the interview process, and part of here that we would like you, if the volunteer here, we would like you to go through this training. And make that a press as part of the process for people becoming volunteers. But it also may be a required, and also may be a required, and if it's required, it requires board action, it may require both. So I will probably have to check with either our policy service or safety people and or our attorney.
Okay.
On what's what.
Okay.
Because once I had my previous district, I had the board wanted to, it was kind of the coaching volunteers versus non-coaching volunteers conversation. And there was like, the board was upset that coaches had to go through all the hoops, but the non-athletic ones didn't. And, the explanation's the same, right? It's because the state controls the certification, and in order to get the certification, you have to do certain things, and part of that was fingerprinting. Well, the board wanted to have all volunteers fingerprinted. At one point, we actually called the state. We got yelled at for being discriminatory. Now, it may be different now. I mean, that's a while ago at this point. But better just I better double check on that answer to know.
Okay. Yeah. So, Dr. Glover, was there anything else that you wanted us to look at or go over? Or?
And not at this time. I think at this point, this gets us at a kind of a good spot. We're about to, the board will, next year we'll have to kind of reconstitute this committee. I'm pretty sure it will. I would surprise, it may not, but my gut tells me it's going to, since we've kept it. And then once we get that next policy committee together, then we can get back together Because really the work we have done here, the safety plan is going to be taken care of over the summer. We already have the two other policies. We have those changes set. They just have to go back to the board for their first reads. And it's just the question of the sexual harassment training, and does that need policy or can that be practiced? And that can be the kind of one of the next conversations at the at an ensuing committee meeting.
Yeah. And
So
yeah, we can add the student member to that conversation.
I have something, even though I will be gone. This is from a few years ago. After Frank Fraunhofer Sr. passed away, we had talked as a board about naming somewhere on the facility something for him. The family, it was too soon. It was too raw for them to even consider. But now with the building project underway, and now more time has passed, just not to forget that that was something that had been discussed, and that was something that we were going to look through policy to see if any changes needed to be made in order to do that.
Mary, that's policy 5633.
But since I was the last board member involved in that conversation, I just don't want that to be lost.
Thank you for saying that, because I never saw a record of that conversation, so I'm glad you brought it up. Thank you. Were there any thoughts at the time about what would be an appropriate?
We went from the gambit of a bench all the way to the high school wing, naming it after him, because he was a coach, he was a teacher, he was just an all around
Great human being.
yeah. I guess I think in talks with some family members, I think might maybe be appropriate.
Okay. I thank you for saying that. I'm glad that. I would hate to have seen that got dropped. That's a.
Yeah, I was going to mention it in executive session, but we didn't have it yesterday.
So.
Only once in a blue moon, Mary,
I think that was only the second time in my 9 years I have not had an executive session.
Yep. Just planets lined up right. They're just.
Well, that's good. Oh, no, that was my to-do list. So if there's nothing else, then we can let you get back to your fire alarms.
Oh, yeah. I'm glad they held off. That's what to do.
And Mary, best of luck to you and your family. And it's so exciting. I can't wait to hear the news.
Yeah, you just want to get past the point that everything's okay, and then you can do the.
Yeah. The snuggle in and
It's
enjoy.
Very different. Your child having a child versus you having the child, because you're worried about her and the baby.
Yes, that will go on.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, well, that's great. Well, very good.
I guess we'll see you next week.
That's right. So, Dr. Glover, you're good?
We are all good. I am stopping the recording.
All right.